Hey, what's up? Cosmo here. Let's take a look how to simply trails your stuff in Blender. So when you open your file, you're going to see this very interesting animation going on. Some sample effects are provided within the file. There is a greeting message telling that you can change some of the provider setups and examples just here in the Blender outliner. Even the famous candle is here. So when I move the candle, the flame tries to go off. And some basic trails as well. When you select some of these examples, here in the Modifiers tab, you are going to see all the settings for the Simply Trails. By the way, very important thing to note, this is not an add-on. This is a geometry node modifier bundled with some shaders that you can quickly start off your creations, your Simply Trails creations. So, when you access the modifier panel, you are going to see the settings available for this Simply Trails modifier. And every option you hover a mouse, there will be a tooltip here telling you what that feature does, that parameter does. For example, steps. Define how many steps will have the trail. There is even a tip here. Keyframe this to gradually turn off on the trail. Interesting. So, if I make it 5, it should be smaller. But, as you can see here at the bottom, there is this purple bar, right? That purple bar here is a buffer. Blender is caching this simulation on the system. And sometimes when you change a parameter, it does not reflect instantaneously. And to change that behavior, I really prefer to come here in the Physics tab and turn off the cache. Because when I turn off the cache, this buffer here won't be created anymore. So which means that now I can see the effect happening instantaneously. So now I'm going to change it for 30 and it's going to create 30 steps of a trail. So what is a step? Step is every time a frame is processed, one step is done. So there will going to be 30 steps, 30 extrusions to create this trail. So here you can define it. And there is a little tip there. It says that I can keyframe it to gradually turn on and off. Let's see. On the frame 152, there will going to be 30 steps. Let's play a little bit. And here on the frame 200, going to be 0. Let's come back to the beginning. Let's see if that happens. Press play. Then it's gradually turning off. Ooh. Here on the tapery section, for example. So if I move this to this side, the trail now has the inverse effect. Cool. What about use custom curve? This is a little bit advanced feature here. So if I turn it on, there is a more interesting curvature for this. So there is a little hint here how to manipulate the custom curve. So it is editable in the geometry node editor, highlighted in a purple frame. So if I go to the geometry node, let's see where it is, geometry node editor, and I look for on this beautiful giant organized mass for a purple custom curve, I'm going to be able to manipulate the shape of my trail with 100% freedom. Let's see. Let's make it very crazy. Wow. Very interesting. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the materials. But before I proceed, so if you already know how to use the asset browser, you can skip this section. But let's start fresh, a new file fresh, and see how I can make use the asset browser from any project I start with. Okay? So let's come here and let's go to default, load factory settings. I'm going to reset my Blender settings, and let's learn how to use the asset browser to import your Simply trails for every new scene you start. From here, I'm gonna make my interface bigger so you guys can see even on a phone. Okay? To use the asset browser, you go to the preferences and file path, and there is this section called asset library. You're going to press the plus button, and you are going to point out where you have the Simply Trails file on your computer. So I'm doing this myself here, and I have how to rename this. So I'm gonna call it Simply Trails. It is just a path pointing to where you have stored your file, and then you can save your preferences. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to override my settings here. And every time now you bring up the asset browser, you are going to see the asset browser right here. I'm showing all the libraries at the moment, but you can filter exactly to the Simply Trail. How to use it from scratch? Oh, well, you see this beautiful logo, Simply Trails. Just drag and drop on the object you want to create the trail on. Oh, let's use the default cube. Yeah, because it can trail anything. I'm not going to delete this beautiful guy. So let's press play and let's move the cube. It's already happening. That's super easy. So cool. Nice. So that's how you set up. Let's go to the render mode. And things are happening here. Let's record a cool movement for this cube. Press this button, hit G and start moving on the screen. So now it's dancing with my mouse. That's enough, cube. Thank you very much. Let's set my timeline only for the section I have recorded this animation. So, okay. And let's turn this off. And of course, I'm talking about this small purple bar here, which is caching everything here. And sometimes you see things are not happening. What's happening? Okay. Don't worry. Let's clean this cache. Let's come here and let's not use cache for the moment, because when you are experimenting with the settings, I strongly recommend you go into the physics tab and disabling cache. Disabling that now will show instantaneously everything that I change here. I'm gonna change. So if I make 5 steps, it's going to be 5 steps. If I say 0 steps, it's 0 steps. If I make 30 steps, instantaneously responds to my command. That's what I need. Let's use taper. Taper is being used. Okay. Let's talk about the materials a little bit. Because now if you can come here and let's say drag and drop a material on the set material field, you are going to see that material is being applied to a trail. If I try the smear, come here, drop, you're seeing the smear, a little bit subtle. So if I bring the sword effect, will that work? Let's see. Not as pretty as I thought, but it works. Okay, now if I want to add it, one of these built-in materials, how I would do that? Okay, you're going to need the shader editor to do that. So let's bring the shader editor right here. Or if it doesn't have a material, how I would do that? Let's try to change to the sword one. Let's see what's gonna happen. So what happens is my cube disappeared. You see, when I apply the material, my cube became assigned to that material. So that's not what I want. So that's Editing existing material is kind of a little bit counterintuitive, I would say, at the moment. So let's not assign this material to the cube, to the emitter itself, because as you can see, our cube is emitting the trail and the material is being assigned to the trail here on the set material, right? So I can set the material here. So in this case, let's add a, let's say, reference object. For example, this plane right here. And let's assign the basic trail to this. Okay. And now I can pin the shader editor, and now I can edit this trail myself. So yes, I left some mess on my trail material. You don't need this, you don't need that. Here is what you need. So if I want to change the color of the trail, you can now come here and change it whatever color you want. And the trail provides some quick node groups where you can change some of the parameters. So if you know shading, you know what to do with this stuff. Here we have a gradient that goes from 1 to 0. With that, I can plug in a shaded transparent, mix with a shaded transparent and my emission, and that is going to give this fading effect. And here we have another node group called ST Trail Velocity. Quickly compositing tutorial. Use nodes, say bloom, attach bloom, come back to your layout and display the bloom always. So now I can demonstrate the trail velocity. Let's just remove these keyframes for now. We have our cube here, and let's pump it up the power. So the quick you move, brighter the light will be. As you can see, quick, boom. That is what it's doing here on the ST trail velocity. There are these two node groups provided where you can quickly mess it up. If you are a shaded artist, you're probably going to know how to work with these guys. Okay? Let's move it on. All the other parameters are here. Let's enable wind, which is going to create by default a wind going upwards. And then if I go to the vector, I can define a direction to it. Let's say Y direction or negative Y direction, or let's say X direction mixed with Y. Let's say 0 here. You got the idea. So what about object? Here I can define any object to be the source of the wind or the ruler of the wind. Let's say what this camera is doing here. Let's set it up. Okay, the camera is now defining the direction of my wind. So if I rotate the camera, now my wind corresponds to the rotation of the camera. You can even set your source object as your emitter itself. Very cool. Nice. What does turbulence? I don't know. Let's turn it on and see. It creates a turbulence. So let's expand turbulence. And of course, if you hover your mouse, you can see what the settings does. We have looping, which means the turbulence gonna be looping in an interval of frames you can specify here. Define the interval of frames until the turbulence animation loops. Let's say 5 frames. So now you have 5 frames of turbulence. Let's say 10 frames of looping turbulence. Let's change the seed which is going to create a new pattern. for your turbulence. All right, you got the idea. Let's take a look on inertia, what it does. Let's see. Let's turn on inertia. Let's hover the mouse here and say, scale the magnitude of the velocity, giving it more power at the emission point. With only inertia turning on, let's take a look and see what it does. Inertia. Let's move the cube. So as you can see, when I move my cube, it shoots to the direction of the movement. Can be interesting. So if I increase the energy lost, it doesn't go too far away anymore. And if I probably turn energy loss to 0, it's going to keep moving as far as it can go, like in 0 gravity, something like that. Let's rotate to see. That's really interesting. You can even set negative values here. What happens? It goes on the opposite direction that I'm moving the cube now. It gives momentum on the negative direction of the movement. I don't know how you're gonna use it, but I leave it to you. There is vertex group. How to use vertex group? Let's say you have your character, whatever it is, and you don't want to create the trail for the whole object. So you can come here and say, let's see only this section, and you're gonna create your vertex group, and you can press this button right here. Looks like I don't know, a spreadsheet. Let's press this and let's point to your group just created, which are these 2 vertices right here. And now let's see what happens if I move. The trail is being created exactly where I need. That's amazing. And that's how to use the vertex group. Another thing I want to show you, let me bring here geometry wireframes. And at the moment, we are using the evaluated, which means that if I have this cube more dense, like subdivided version of this cube, that trail would have exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertices right there. So of course, as I subdivided, my vertex groups need to be updated. Let me update that. Let's remove everything. Let's select only these guys, assign again. Let's press play. And of course, let's turn off inertia for the moment. And as you can see, now I have this trail exactly on the same amount of vertices as the source. So if I change this to count, I can make it even more lightweight. So now when I move, let's press play. Let's move. Now the trail only has 2 points on the emission, even though the source has 5. That helps you to make even lighter trails. So this subdivision does what it sounds like. It's going to subdivide your trail. Be careful with these settings. Don't abuse substeps and subdivision too much. Substeps, for example, what it does is, let me try to make 2 keyframes here. Okay, you see the trail coming from here to there. Substeps will allow you to increase the amount of steps per step. So in this case, 3 substeps, which means, so let's say from here to there, we have created 1 step plus 3. 1, 2, 3 substeps. We have 3 substeps in 1 step. Okay? So if you have questions, we have a Discord server that we can give you direct support on Simply Trails if you are a customer. So good luck on your creations, and I see you next time.